Hey guys, so before I proceed with this video, it's important I address that if you love God of War Ragnarok or on the opposite end of the spectrum, hated it, it's totally cool to have your positioning on anything regarding this game. This video is a reflection of my views and beliefs in an effort to condense my thoughts and feelings about one of the biggest and to some, arguably the best video game of 2022 and a Game Awards winner of Best Narrative. However, I will unequivocally be letting my thoughts and feelings be known without pandering or appeasing to a particular mob or audience. If you like what I'll have to say or strongly disagree, let me know in the comments or hit the thumbs buttons. God of War Ragnarok's narrative picks up right after the events of 2018's reboot title, and sets the premise this time for a slightly more complex story. However, it's not without its elements of social engineering that has been finely tuned not to go full woke in case it would have went full broke. This game starts with the epitome of video game masculinity, the God of War, sad, in a cave. Presumably to the player still grieving his Norse mythology saga wife, whilst having totally moved on from the fact he slaughtered his family back in Greece and wears their ashes.
All would know him for the beast he had become, his skin white with the ash of his dead family. The ghost of Sparta had been born.
Shortly after Kratos is attacked by Freya, who was hell-bent on revenge for the death of Baldur in 2018, we assume Freya has been attempting to kill Kratos and Atreus since that time, to relatively no success every time the two venture away from the stave. I actually don't have any other comments about most of the introductory sequences. It's a little movie-esque, but I'm okay with that if you enjoy narrative-based games. Important to note, I'm not one of those people that followed the development of this game or any particular announcements. I simply played every God of War since the PlayStation 2, including 2018, and pre-ordered this game approx 20 days before I noticed its launch. My first cringe came through the door with Odin. He looked sickly and sounded like a salesman offering Kratos an insurance plan. Flabbergasting choice to say the least, since this kind of depiction of Odin isn't what would come to mind for most people. I failed to see Odin's defining traits of wisdom, knowledge, or royalty. At this point, my first impressions were fast-talking weasel. However, note Odin's proposition, stop looking for Tyr. Stop causing shit and killing my people, and we have peace. And yes, to address the elephant in the room, the obese Thor. Man, what a disgrace. Let's demasculate the pinnacle of AC masculinity and give him real-life people problems like gluttony and addiction. At least I found his dialogue rather quip and sturdy, so I noted my thoughts and was still genuinely intrigued by the story moving forward.
Was hoping to see your blade. Guess they don't come when you call.
So, despite Odin's request with the offer of peace, we go looking for Tyr anyway, and the road leading us to finding him was as boring as the guy's personality. The guy, or God, is some pacifistic, broken down man that blah 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 is too matured now to kill and needs therapy on Sindri's daybed, who desperately needs to start treatment of TRT so he doesn't bloom a vagina. That's Tyr I'm talking about. However, Sindri gives off seriously homosexual vibes. Eventually we find ourselves playing as Atreus, and I can't help but have this feeling that's akin to when I first controlled Abby in The Last of Us Part 2. After inspecting Atreus' skill tree, I still genuinely thought this was a novelty, and I find myself rolling my eyes again, this time at sad Freya. Remember, these old boys are deities, and it all started to brew within me. They're humanized, so they can be more relatable. Look, I don't have a problem with some of the other somber moments like the wolf dying. That scene even had a role for what happens later in the game, but I'm displeased to see every second supposedly divine being acting like they need to see a shrink. People will argue it's a mature story that explores polarities of certain themes, but frankly, I don't care to see mythological gods with people problems.
All right, that's enough.
You have a game here set in a brutal time for the Norse mythology with savage beings, but everything about this narrative is feeling pretty light thus far. Almost as if the devs are too careful to be bold and display these characters in anything but a relatable light in one way or another. Personally, I'd rather see these characters lacking human emotion and being wielded by higher thought processes, being cold, brutal, savage, violent, anything but emotional. Jotunheim was a nightmare I was not woke enough to endure. After 20 minutes, I kept telling myself, hopefully it's just 10 minutes more. Atreus clearly establishes his role as a cucked simp for an African girl who somehow found her way to a Norse realm. We partake in running chores and fixing her problems for approximately 2 hours here, and the entire time I couldn't help but brainstorm what else was going to be on the agenda. Pun intended. I'll address this now for the purpose of continuity. Angerboda being black is another woke inclusivity flex about multiculturalism and diversity. Don't get me started on the light and dark elf side of the relationship. You see snippets later on in the game. Real subtle, Santa Monica. Take a look at this post. God of War writer champions Angerboda as, quote, our spin, end quote, of the Norse mythology. You have to be really fucking naive to be watching this in 2023 and beyond and not interpret this panda of diversity as conformist wokeism. He literally says it's our take on Norse mythology, not history. Your take is exactly what this is, we know. Interracial couples are a minority. They're a minority in England, the USA, and statistically, it's somewhere around 4% of white men being married to black women. And if I'm wrong about that figure, enlighten us, because even if it's about 7 or 10%, it's still a minority. We've established going forward the Norse mythology will be spun in any way the writers were feeling that day, and given testosterone plummets by about 1% annually in men, it's no surprise this God of War Ragnarok is 17% less androgenic than the original as a scientific minimum. I can already see in hindsight my comments on Angerboda will divide a room, so before you screech that I'm a racist, ask yourself, would Japanese people be happy if Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun, and part of my pronunciation, was portrayed as black, or Tsukayumi, the god of the moon? How about other cultures, such as African deities being white? I don't think that would beckon a positive reception if the writers just said, it's our spin on your mythology. I can't believe I actually have to drift this far off course from the topic of God of War Ragnarok, but liberal lunacy has run rampant, and this video is not under exception from potential contagion. So, back in Midgard now, after 2 hours of appeasing Angerboda doing chores, Freya had yet another shot at us, then couldn't stop harping on about it in Vanaheim.
You know, I would have beaten you.
What?
Earlier. If Atreus hadn't been there.
Perhaps.
We could go again. Find out for certain.
I would rather not.
How she had us and could have killed us, and for a while there it almost looks as if Kratos is so overcome with guilt for killing Balder that he's basically going to stand there and take it if Freya cut him down and orphans his son, because Freya's revenge is more understandable and we feel sad and guilty for saving her life back in 2018. Eventually Atreus runs away to Asgard and we meet the best character in Ragnarok, Heimdall, whose cutscenes and dialogue I enjoyed and started rooting for him to actually kill Atreus, but ultimately knew there was no way Woke of War was going to allow such a thing. What they did manage to write in was the most anticlimactic boss fight against Heimdall as Kratos, where the Aesir Watchman with powers of foresight kept catching and allowing a spear to detonate in his hand and around him until... Though the portion of the story where we go about obtaining the spear isn't by any means bad, I can't help but not fully grasp why it was used as Heimdall's kryptonite so vaguely. We're more than halfway through now and nothing's put me on the edge of my seat or exceeded my expectations. The game, in quality mode, performing relatively well on the PS5 was the standout feature. I commend the game for keeping me engaged thus far, and the opening up of the crater side section really allows you to go and explore to buff Kratos if you so choose. In my experience, if I just followed natural progression with minimal side quests, boss battles with berserkers would have been a majorly sharp increase in difficulty. But after spending about 2 hours in the crater completing side quests and obtaining armor, upgrading runic abilities on the balanced difficulty, things started to feel a bit easy. Which I credit as a good thing. I just spent multiple hours off the beaten path and I'm rewarded with a stronger character to make life on the main quest a little easier. Though I fail to praise any of the narrative content in these side quests, it feels like the most significant thing I learnt was that Faye and Thor had a massive battle in the region, and we further established Thor had a substance abuse disorder.
Thor was drunk, sloppy, but she was drunk on something else.
Right on cue, the moment I told myself I was going to make this video happened. Resume playing as Atreus and go back to Asgard to work for Odin, who has become so obsessed with the mask, he instantly reprimands Atreus for having a hand in the death of Heimdall, and we encounter Thor, who's seemingly in his element, getting shit-faced at the local. I have to say, this portrayal of Thor cements him as a degenerate slob, polar opposite bad dad of Kratos, who can't get his shit together and probably has a sexless marriage with his wife where his own chubby daughter pities him, and Atreus, some pre-pube, who played a hand in killing his sons, is offering him water like it's 3 a.m. and he's just been ejected from a bar for intoxication, which I suppose, one way or another, he just has been. Matter of fact, I want to take a minute to go on a bit of a tangent. I've worked at a bar, and I've never seen people's children be subjected to those kinds of antics, and this is supposed to be a god with Ragnarok foretold around the corner, just drinking his problems, whatever the hell they are, away, and apparently this is good writing. Thor is like humans now. Well, I'll tell you this much. No one feels empathy for an alcoholic. Most times, they're some of the more hated people in society, especially ones that subject their children to it. But I guess since Thor is more comedic relief in this game, playing the role of a mythological pig, rather than the pinnacle of Norse masculinity, it's to be expected from Boy of War Ragnarök.
Let it be known, the god of thunder is good for 2 things. Killing giants and pissing me!
What if you started again? Right now, just put down the...
To make matters worse, I now have to travel with hungover Thor, and I play as Atreus for yet another hour when I don't have a single point to spend on any other of his skills. I was really hoping this part of the story was beginning to come together for what would make the conclusion of this story be Kratos vs Thor and Odin, and right on cue, another moment of complete cringe. Thor, all of a sudden, wakes from his stupor and has an epiphany that the kid lecturing him killed his sons. Now, if you've kept telling yourself Thor looks like a powerlifter, then you probably already know that in God of War lore, your body has nothing to do with your strength as a god. The body is a direct reflection of what you do, as referenced by Kratos in multiple lulls of the game.
Father, when do I look like you?
In what way?
Like, bigger. When do I get muscles like yours?
When you work for them.
But Baldur was really strong, and he didn't have any muscles.
My strength does not come from my body, but both are honed by discipline.
And I think it's pretty clear what Thor does, and ultimately, I'm not a fan of this take on Norse mythology. So, Odin eventually comes out as the imposter, and this completely salvaged the character of Tyr, which I had completely stopped caring about. Actually answered a few questions regarding the pessimism, and in hindsight, I saw a lot of Odin's true self shining through in Shapeshifter Tyr. Now, of course, the second most likable character in the game gets offed, and now everyone's emotional again. Everyone blames themselves, Sindri blames everyone, and I'm wondering, the hell did Shapeshifter Tyr go when Odin was in Asgard with Atreus and we could see Odin in the cutscenes? So did Tyr just vanish from Sindri's house in those instances and no one ever caught wind of anything sus? Way to be upset there, Sindri, but you left shapeshifter Tyr unsupervised in your home. Awful lot of emotion flying around in this narrative, but not a lot of personal responsibility. Well, I guess some. The story basically concludes with you summoning the monster of Ragnarok, who didn't really do anything except provide some background chaos and serve as an opportunity for an irrelevant character to self-sacrifice. Where did he even go? Did he just get left locked in Asgard wreaking havoc? The game doesn't even elaborate on this. It's just Ragnarok is over. Enjoy exploring now. Frankly speaking, the ending just felt poorly written. Thor's wife all of a sudden aligns with Kratos and Atreus when just a couple of hours ago she was content with Thor killing Atreus. It just made Sindri's anger and resentment seem all that more comical considering we killed her sons and were about to do battle with her husband and Sindri was blaming everyone but himself.
What? You want to thank you?
No, I just want...
I don't care what you want. This changes nothing.
For Brock's death. Look, I understand there are stages to grief, but he was like the gay uncle for Atreus in this game, and now he's snubbed everyone. I totally don't think that's how Brock would want to be honoured, given his personality. Sindri involved in combat in this alpha role when he was totally wimped out, and a germaphobe when he joined Atreus to find Freya early in the game, to me just totally doesn't fit this 180 shift in personality. He's emotionally driven without a hint of logic, and if anyone thinks this sets up Sindri to be a great antagonist, that would be a total shit show, and I wouldn't want to see it. Personally, I had enough of sad gods and deities in this installment. It was already a basket case resolving Freya's grief from 2018 for half of this game. Maybe that's why Sif just randomly wiped the slate clean in the final hour of Ragnarok. For all my criticism of the narrative, the game ultimately turned out to be an experience well worth having. The combat was fun and story engaging, thoroughly enough. I just don't think it's anything to hold on a pedestal, sing home about, or note as Oscar worthy. This is a great game when taking into account all of its merits, but for me the narrative is lackluster when compared with previous entries in the series. The brutality and viciousness is toned down and completely missing in some instances, and I think the world is so hell-bent on being politically correct and afraid to risk being insensitive that even storytelling that should reflect utter savagery, gore, and destruction are all toned down in effort to make the narrative more attractive for an emotionally incontinent generation. Alright, now I better get back to the side task and return the love poem I lent to Sindri, which belongs to the interracial elven couple. If you enjoyed this video or agree with my thoughts, please consider subscribing and leave a like, and comment your personal opinion if you didn't. If you got this far, thank you for your time. I hope everyone had a safe and happy New Year's for 2023, and all the best to you and yours for the future. Peace.